Hello, I'm Virginia Crowe, and today I'm delighted to be interviewing Tempest Wright about her new story, which is featured in the Masterworks anthology. I have lots and lots of questions here. I'm sure there are going to be fantastic answers on their way. So let's see what Tempest has to say. Our first question is, tell us a little bit about yourself and what made you write, what inspired you to write in the first place, and what else you've written as well as the Masterworks story.
Okay, well, let's see if I can get that all in. I write mostly historical fiction and a lot of fantasy, but it's kind of a running joke that I can rarely write short stories. So when I told my friends that I was writing a short story, historical fiction in 10,000 words, they're looking at me like, no. Currently I'm writing a historical fiction based in 1832 called the McCarthy Journals, and that has turned into a series and an epic series. And I also write fantasy. I like fairy tale retellings, and again, that has, it started with one story and now it's blossomed into several. So that's going to be a series, an epic series as well.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, I totally understand what you were saying about how things just grow and grow and grow. Yeah, I started off with an idea for a short story many years ago, and it turned into a novel in its own right. So yeah, it just happens. I don't know how it happens.
It does. It's not my fault, I swear. But how I got started, I was actually 8 years old. And we were learning cursive, which I'm dating myself, I know. But we were learning cursive, and my grade 3 teacher, she told me, if you can write really well, then you might be able to write a novel one day. I'll write a book. And so my 8-year-old brain thought, yeah, let's do it. So by the next year, I had finished my first novel, which was about sea creatures of all things, because I don't know why, I lived on the prairies. And I just loved the characters so much, I didn't want to let them go. And so by middle school, I had written about 4 books of...
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Did you dedicate any of them to your 3rd grade teacher?
I actually, you know what? I didn't. I feel really bad about that. But the truth is, I haven't actually been published yet, except for a few short stories. As far as trying to publish, I never tried really, and the thought actually occurred in high school. And I have a teacher to thank for that too.
Yeah, teachers are great.
Yeah, they are. He's my drama history teacher. But he actually, I wrote down just a few skits of my own doing, and he actually used them, and it was the first time that I ever felt my writing kind of validated, like it might have had a purpose. And so after that, he was a big inspiration in my life. So after that, I was like, no, I want to write. And that's about the time that the McCarthy Journals was created. And so I've been working on that for, oh wow, over 10 years. So it's a long project.
Mm-hmm. I'm very impressed that you've stuck with it for that length of time.
But again, it's mostly character-driven stories that I love. I can't let go of the characters, their stories, their personalities. Just they grow, and I can't get rid of them.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. They're like stalwart friends, yeah. And even if you do try and shake them off, they just like come back again. It's they don't take the hint.
Wake you up in the middle of the night telling you about this new thing they're gonna do, and you're like, oh.
Yeah, and you're like, oh my goodness, that sounds so amazing. Of course I have to write about it.
It's like, get some sleep. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I'm quite intrigued as well about the fact you wrote about sea creatures when you were in a landlocked area. That's fascinating, because to me the sea is such a draw. I live by the sea, and I wouldn't have it any other way, because once you've been to the sea, I don't think you ever lose it again. So
yeah, we had I lived in Edmonton, Alberta for I was born and raised in that area. But they had, for a while, they had dolphins at West Edmonton Mall.
Mhm.
And that's where I fell in love with them. And so I did a lot of nonfiction reading, and that's where the inspiration came from. So,
Okay, that does make sense then in that case, yeah.
but I live by the ocean now, so I'm good.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, good. Just how many time zones are there between us?
It is 1 o'clock in the morning. About
Oh my goodness, this is a horrible time for you then. Oh, I'm so
no,
sorry.
this is actually a really good time. My husband works nights, so
Oh, okay. Oh, that's all right then.
hence why I'm drinking. I guess I'm drinking too early in the morning, but oh well.
Well, don't worry, because no one will know that it's just gone 9 o'clock in the morning here. So, oh.
Perfect. We're good. We're good.
So, Tempest, tell us about why you chose this particular artwork that you chose for the Masterworks anthology.
Okay, would you like me to share the screen?
Yes, if you have it there ready.
I do. So I chose this piece by Hughes. And I chose it as soon as I heard the theme, because I had seen this before, and it's very dark. I think that's pretty much, it's just, I didn't realize how, I was just kind of intrigued by it and what had got that woman there. I used to go into galleries, and I used to look at things like this where there was a woman or a couple, and I used to imagine stories surrounding them. And so I learned the title. It was called Lunatic of Etretat. And I thought, okay, I'd like to write a story about it. So yeah.
And if you look really closely, you realize that actually what she's holding there is in fact not a child.
It's a log. It's a piece of firewood.
Gosh. Oh my goodness.
That's also what intrigued me. So a lot of the stories surrounding this, they say it's either the woman lost a child or is yearning for a child, and that's the madness. It also looks very haunting. She doesn't look like she's all there. And others, I saw one piece where they said, well, this could have represented France, because it was finished in 1871. It could have represented France in their Franco-Prussian wars when they actually were defeated, but there's no evidence to suggest that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of where authors of historical fiction have their fun, when there's no evidence, and you can just
exactly. It's finding those cracks and just putting your story in there. I love things like images that have their own story, and straight away they have that story, but you don't know what that story is. I think there's a real appeal to that. So yeah, I was quite fascinated by the artwork you chose, and very impressed with the story too.
Oh, good.
So let's move on to the story. The main part of the story, like you said, it was finished in 1871, did you say, the painting?
The painting was finished in 1871, but what I did is I looked up some information on Hughes Merle, and the interesting thing is his youth is completely undocumented. His birth is documented, but then he just shows up in Paris in his 20s, and he's under a professional art teacher. So I decided that his inspiration for this painting may have come when he was a child.
I think that's another great sort of gap in history to explore in there. Yeah. So the story centers around Paris 1832, is it?
Yeah.
Now, I have to admit that the only thing I know about this particular riot and rebellion is in fact Les Mis. That's been my go-to thing. So yeah, it was really good to find out a bit more about what was going on there. But in the back of my head, I think those songs, that soundtrack became the soundtrack for the story. But yeah.
And it's amazing how many people think that rebellion is actually, when they watch Les Mis, they think, oh, that's the French Revolution, and it's like, no. That wasn't the French Revolution. That was a 2-day rebellion. So, but so many people, so many people watch Les Mis, and they think that, yeah. So
because really it was almost like the tail end, the children of those people who had been involved in the French Revolution. It was like
Yes.
next generation sort of thing, wasn't it?
Yes, it
Yeah.
was. I was actually quite interested in finding out. Well, of course, you had the king, Louis Philippe, but most of his advisors and the people in power or the revolutionaries, a lot of them lost fathers to the Reign of Terror. When you went through all the research, and I was surprised just how many did lose. I think there's at least 2 or 3 that lost fathers, including the king himself. The king himself lost his father in the Reign of Terror. So
yeah, I mean, living with that, it must have been just horrendous when you think that a lot of them would have been children at the time, or youths at least. And yeah, oh, it's almost unthinkable.
yeah.
So if you had been just separating the two, separating the Reign of Terror to this this little, well, it amounted to not much more than a skirmish, really. But because it was in the city, I suppose it felt a lot bigger. Which side would you have been on, and why?
I looked at that question and I'm like, oh, because personally, for personal my personal beliefs, I'm actually very politically neutral. So I do not take sides. But what it does is it allows you to see the viewpoints from 2 perspectives. And it doesn't mean you don't sympathize with either perspective, but it allows you to take an outside view. So I think the rebels had, like, you look at this rebellion and how it started, and there were a lot of people there, but not even the rebels were united in one cause. They were all different. They wanted change. That was about all I can say they wanted in common. Some wanted a completely new republic. Others were there just to honor a fallen hero. Others were probably just desperate. There was an association that was involved in trying to kind of make it an organized revolt, and that's the association that one of my characters kind of gets mixed up in, and they wanted a new republic. So you're looking at all of this, and cholera too was a major part in this rebellion. It was an epidemic in France, and I almost laughed because there was a story circulating when this because this rebellion had its stage during a funeral. Some people said that that man, who was known as a friend of the people, was poisoned by cholera by the king, which, as we know, can't really happen. But I mean, it's not too different. Like, we've been through a pandemic, and it's amazing what people will generate for stories and what fear can do. And so you definitely sympathize with the fear, you sympathize with their desperation, but at the same time, you're like, you're not united. Even if they got into power, what kind of change could they bring about? And then you look at the king, who came from the Reign of Terror. His father did die in the Reign of Terror. He had spent his life in exile. He was actually called the Citizen King because he was put in place by the people only 2 years before that. But he was also walking a middle ground between extreme liberals and extreme conservatives, and never the two shall meet. And I think we see this, even today, where somebody's trying to keep things peaceful, middle ground, and it's just not working. It means nothing's getting done. Therefore, the people aren't happy, and the king's stuck trying to keep himself alive and in power, and at the same time having to deal with rebellions, which I'm thinking most of the king and their advisors would probably have horrible memories of. You can sympathize with both sides, and just being like neutral, I wouldn't pick one side over the other, because both were completely faulted.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Shut the shutters and wait until it's all gone.
Which most people in Paris did at the moment. Actually, it was kind of interesting because in my research, this one, especially this one, it was called I forget what I'm freezing now because I'm on interview, but one of my research aides was completely with, most of the people are completely with the rebels. When you look at the research, it's all funneled into support for the rebels, and Paris didn't come and support them. But again, when you look at the actual situation and you look at all the memories and the situations that they were wanting to change, the king couldn't control the drought. He could control the funnel of money, so he was culpable. A lot of his advisors are known for their cruelty in the response. Like, the response was huge compared to the amount of men. I think 60,000 men and cannons in the city was overkill.
Yeah, I think so.
But at the same time, like, I mean, when you're dealing with people who remember the Reign of Terror so vividly, you know.
Yeah.
So again, I'm completely politically neutral. I would be back then, but you can sympathize with the feelings, but at the same time, you can recognize that neither would have made much of a difference. So
exactly. I mean, you would think that having it in living memory, they would realize that that they weren't prepared, that, you know, they were never going to get that result again, and you know, like you said, the fact that the king was reinstated by his people, you've got to question why they thought at that point in time, 2 years later, it was a good time to stage another revolt. But
you know what, there was another revolt 2 years later. There was another revolt, I think 8 years down the road. I looked at 1800s Paris, and it's full of this. Like, the final republic that you have wasn't really established, I don't think, until around the mid 1800s, from that initial French Revolution, which was the 1790s. So you're looking at, you know, 1780s. You're looking at a long time of revolutionary fervor and a lot of emotion. And I actually kind of see the parallels right now. A lot of people have a lot of emotion, but there's not a lot of change. And I think we can all sometimes sympathize with the idea that people want change and
they don't necessarily know what they want it to change into. Yeah,
exactly.
Just,
or how to do it. So again, like, being politically neutral, I appreciate the idea of looking outside in.
You did manage to create a really good balance across the story. Yeah, you had some great lines where you realized that, well, I don't want to give away any spoilers, but you know, you realized that perhaps there was more important things that were going on behind the scenes, than the actual politics of it.
Yeah, I love if you go into history, like, I ironically, like, I hate politics. But when you're talking about historical politics, they're a good stage to center a story around. So there you go.
Now, you've touched on this a little bit already, talking about research. What was your favorite thing to research? And did you discover something that you were particularly proud of?
Well, the hardest thing was coming up with an antagonist, because I wanted it to be kind of historical, but there was no historical one where I could really make them a bad guy. And it's really hard when you're talking about an actual person. You don't want to make them you're talking about politicians, so there's always a bad side to them. But I found my antagonist, and he's fictional, but his father is not. And the reason I got away with that is because there's no record that I can find of this man ever having children.
Okay, yes, yeah. So it's definitely
married.
Someone who could have been there, yeah.
Could have been, who knows, but there's no record at all. So that's how I got away from that. But I think the most interesting thing I stumbled upon was a man named Lafayette. Have you ever heard of him? Nope. Okay, well, I did hear of him, and I'm thinking, well, it sounds familiar, and I found out he was an American revolutionary hero, but he's French.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so he's actually the one giving speeches in my story. He was giving speeches before the rebellion turned into and before this mass gathering turned into a riot. And what I appreciated about him is, in the beginning, because France and Britain were so, when he was quite young, before the French Revolution, his father was killed by the British. So when the American Revolution started, he thought it was a very noble idea. So he went towards it, and after many years of fighting in there, he became well known to a hero in the American Revolution, and knew people like Benjamin Franklin. Then he comes back to France, and the French Revolution starts. But then, because it's his own people, he actually tries to be in the middle ground. He's in the National Assembly, but he's not like Robespierre, who was a radical. He was actually trying to help the royals, but because he was with the National Assembly, they were sticking their nose up at him and not listening to him. And that actually led to part of their downfall. Was he was actually very trying to kind of trying to avoid bloodshed, I guess is the right word. Is he wanted change, but he wanted to avoid bloodshed. And this goes through all his life. He actually suffers because he wasn't a radical. So the Radical Assembly orders his arrest. He flees to Austria, gets arrested in Austria, spends years in prison, goes back, finds out that France took his home and everything. He was freed by Napoleon, but won't support Napoleon because he sees him as another dictator. So his lands and everything are gone.
Oh no.
But he doesn't leave. He still tries to see change through France. But at the same time, really tries to avoid bloodshed. And so in my story, you hear him speaking on behalf of the general who died and for change. But then when it starts turning into a riot, you hear him trying to calm them down. And that was actually historical fact, was that he was trying to calm something from turning into a riot. So I just thought his whole life story was just quite amazing.
That is quite amazing.
For all that he did. And I'm thinking, is there a historical series about this person yet?
Well, if there isn't, there should be. That's your next series, your next epic series.
I'm always scared to write about actual historical people. My best is like fictional people around historical people. So maybe I'll include him in another, I don't know, maybe a series will come out of this.
You have to see if you could like create a whole series of short stories, and then it'll be good practice for like cutting down your story size, and then you could have like a whole anthology of your own, with following through everyone who brushes shoulders with him. So yeah,
it could do it.
So you have very different characters, obviously, and actually right up to the end of the story, it's not necessarily clear what side politically they're on in this little riot. And most of them are making use of the chaos rather than actually being a part of it with strong beliefs. Which one, as the writer, were you particularly rooting for?
I don't think it's too much of a mystery there. It was the doctor, Dr. Abbott, and of course Hughes. Like, you know, as far as the doctor goes, I thought he was I love his character. I love his character. He's kind of like a stick in the mud when you first meet him.
Yeah, that does come across.
Exactly. But at the same time, he's fiercely loyal. And I think as the story progresses, you can kind of see Hughes, through Hughes's eyes, just how amazing that doctor is, especially when everything else comes through at the end. So yeah, I was really rooting for the doctor, but I was also rooting for Hughes because, I mean, Oh
Well,
man.
yeah, I mean, it was like you say, it's all from his point of view. So you're kind of in his head and he's in your head. So you really have to be rooting for him, really.
Yeah, exactly.
So like we said, it's all from Hughes's point of view. Hughes is a young man. In fact, he's really a boy, isn't he? He's really a child.
He's 10 years old, 10, 11 years old at this time. He was born in 1822. So by 1832, he would have been only 10 or 11. So they say 1822 or 1821, and I can't seem to find for sure.
Okay, yeah.
Which, I mean, Wikipedia, Wikipedia says it's March something 1820, but you know, Wikipedia is, I like other sources to verify. So
yeah, no, we have the same thing with like genealogy research, because they're done in quarters. They're only registered at the end, or they go in at the end of the quarter, and so it could be anywhere in like a 3-month bracket. So yes,
so he's 10 or 11 at this time.
Yeah. What would you say was the biggest pros or cons of writing from his point of view?
I think it depends what story you're really wanting to write. I mean, for my epics, I'm third person omnipresent, but I mean, that's an epic series where you have to follow different subplots for it all to come together. For a short story, when you only have a little bit of time, it was great having Hughes there, because you get all the emotion and the confusion of being a 10-year-old kid in that time. And at the same time, you're seeing things from a perspective where you don't need all the information. You can assume with Hughes that something's wrong, but he being a child will exaggerate it. I think the biggest pro was just being able to see how quickly his emotions go. Like, I mean, he goes from everything to amusement, like he's happy,
he's kind of swinging backwards and forwards.
To terrified, to scared, to confused and torn, and then inspired, and then all of a sudden just terror and going through these streets, and then also again confusion, and then determination, and then at the end even acceptance of something that he doesn't even know will come, like the way he grows from being so dependent, and then what the riot does to him at the end, where he's just kind of shell-shocked, and then utter happiness at the end. But
yes, well, happy ever after is a very important part for any story for me. So
for me too. There's, you know, life's too full of sad endings, but I do think that seeing it through Hughes' eyes takes you on a roller coaster. And it means you don't get all the information, but that's kind of the gist of the short story. Yeah,
it certainly it builds up like the suspense as you're going through, because you like you say, you're sharing with him in his confusion, and confusion is like such a big part of it. And so it is like just being there and looking at what he's looking at and trying to make sense of what he's trying to make sense of.
And biggest con is trying to make sure you're writing in a way that a 10-year-old would think.
I have to say, I'm very impressed by that.
Good. So that was the only challenge, is making sure that it was age appropriate. But other than that, I think it was the greatest move for the story.
Are you tempted to have a go at a novel in first person perspective?
But like I said, my novels tend to end up in epics, and then all of a sudden I have more characters and more subplots, and then all of a sudden it turns into third person omnipresent, because I can't first person. But I love the way that first person can emotionally move a story forward and contain so much in such a short time. So that's why I really like it for short stories like this. So I'd be tempted, but it always seems that my novels just, you know, you can't tell it from one person, because they just grow and grow, and then it's bad.
Well, I'm very impressed that you tackled it at all, and it did work really, really well in the story. So yeah, well done. Have you got a favorite line from your story, which I don't think I've actually said what your story's called? It's called A Good and Proper Lunacy. And I have to admit that going through the story, I was like, okay, I'm not quite sure where this title's come from. And then obviously it hits you with it towards the end, and it makes so much sense all of a sudden. So yeah, so was there a line which you wrote and you were like, oh my goodness, this is amazing, go me?
You know, honestly, the last line where a grown-up Hughes says, "You'll be proud of me, Monsieur, but I think when I tell you I have found the good and proper lunacy, but you did not tell me, my friend, that it was contagious."
Yeah, that is brilliant.
Yeah, so I love that line. It's just, I don't know, it was the perfect finish, I think.
Yeah, I really liked the little the last section. I suppose in a way it was a bit of an afterword type thing. It tied it all together. You could have left it a little bit earlier, but I think you would have felt cheated if you didn't have that last section. You really did need it in there.
That's why I worked so hard to get that section in there. I had to squeeze my words, but and I had to even leave a few things out that I thought, well, you know what? They don't need to know how, they just need to know it happened. But actually that was kind of what I wanted to include, that you kind of get the viewpoint that Hughes, being so poor, how he might have gotten under that tutelage of a renowned artist, being from where he was from. And so that you can see that the doctor was ever present in his life, even years down the road.
Yeah. Oh, that's lovely. That's fantastic. And since you mentioned it was the last line that you were particularly proud of, that runs really nicely into the next question, which is, what do you hope that readers will take away from your story?
Oh, that was a difficult one, actually, because reading so many books from different authors, they always kind of say what they wanted to message across. And yet I've realized that when you talk to different people, especially, like, for example, I'll say the Hunger Games, I took the author and I'm like, yeah, that comes across really well, but then other people took it completely different. And they sympathized with characters I didn't know you could sympathize with. So looking at my story, I'm like, you know what? Somebody might look at Gabriel and think, that's where I want to be. I want to be influential and change. That's powerful. And Gabriel was a good, he loved his brother. He wanted change. He wanted force for change. Then you
I have to admit, I did feel really sorry for him. I had a bit of a soft spot for him. I thought he was he went about it wrong, but actually I could see where he was coming from.
Yeah, it's and I've met many people like Hughes or Gabriel. Then you have people like Hughes who, have grown up in a situation of feeling torn between loyalties, feeling torn between people and family and causes. And then you have people like the doctor. And while I think the message that I wanted to convey the best was through him, I don't expect everybody would feel the same. So even Giselle, she has her own story. Being a mother, she seems like a very soft figure, but if you think about what she went through, that woman's strong as heck.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I mean, anyone can take any one of these characters and take something from them. But what I really wanted to show and stress is that there's a difference between true love and when it's at the forefront of somebody's focus, and when it gets pushed second, how things can turn out sometimes. So I guess what's most important in your life, you have to decide that from the character's point of view. But yeah, I created the characters and what I thought was most important in their lives. So
So really, it's the connection with the characters that you hope people would form as they leave the story.
Yeah, if anything, like you might learn a lesson. You might say, hey, that's who I want to be. You might say, oh, I've been there. So
hopefully you've literally been there, because there's some
probably
horrible situations
going on. Emotionally, I've been there. So yeah.
I do have a soft spot for historical doctors. So I love writing about them, and I love reading about them. So yeah, Dr. Abbott was way up there for me as well. Yeah.
Oh, good.
If you could time travel, would you want to go back to 1832? Probably not, given what we've talked about. But when would you like to go back to, and why?
You know what? Going through history, there's not one place I'd really care to go back to. There's things I'd like to experience. See a Shakespearean play at the Globe, or see the Titanic before it sunk. Take back a royal secretary's desk and bring it back to my own so I can work on it, because those things were amazing. But honestly, there's no place in time that I'd rather go, because every place, if you do the research, you realize that, we think of Bridgerton and stuff like that. It's like, well, only 5% of the population actually got to enjoy a life like that. Yeah. Maybe that. But one thing I would say, those little, they're kind of playful quips that, all my boyfriends are fictional kind of thing. If I could join a fictional character back in time, I'd go. So if you're talking the Scarlet Pimpernel, I'd say I'll go to the French Revolution and take me with you. Like, let me go on an adventure. If you're talking about Dr. Abbott, I'd totally go, and I'd help them out. If you're talking about my brothers, I'd go, and I'd even be willing to be a servant in their house, because man, the things you'd see.
Yeah.
And the games you'd experience. So I think it's all about, again, it goes all the way back to the characters for me. I love the characters. History is a good stage. But yeah, it's things I'd like to experience, but I don't think I want to go back.
Fair enough. I do understand that, yeah, especially like with all disease and stuff as well. But,
Yep.
So, Tempest, what is next?
So what's next for me is, even though I haven't gotten my own works fully published, I have started on a publishing route. I recently started a publishing company back in December.
Oh, fantastic.
And we released our first book on June 9th. Yeah, it wasn't mine. It was my dear friend. She published an Arthurian fantasy, and it has everything that I love. Really great characters, a good plot, and it was the first of its series. And unfortunately, her publisher went down during COVID, and so we were able to pick it up. And so this is the result. The Once and Forgotten Thing.
Fabulous.
So really proud of it. And it even has, we even put illustrations in it. So this is my achievement this year. I have to remind myself that as a first-time publisher, you will go a little bit slower. I'm trying to get it into bookstores, and I'm trying to get it going, but it's our first book, so you don't usually see a big trend on your first book. But we're hoping that leads into her sequel's almost done.
Wow.
So that's going to be on next thing. And my first book of the McCarthy journals is in for beta reading. So I've been editing it and getting it ready. I even tried to traditionally publish it, but I found that most traditional publishers, it seems to me, I looked around at a lot of agents, a lot of publishers, and they're really wanting something specific or something that's very socially popular. So I write historical fiction, but it's not women based. My two main characters are two brothers. So that was almost completely out. And so it just became clear that my book didn't fit the genres that they were looking for. So that's why I'm going to be hopefully publishing it through my own publishing company. But
I really think
that's where we're
how
headed.
the business is going now. You know, I think there will always be a place for the big mainstream publishers, definitely. You know, and they will almost certainly be the ones who can afford to, you know, have billboards with their books across them and everything like that. But I do think readers now love to connect with an independent publisher, because they feel like they can actually get straight in touch with the people they want to. Whereas if you're talking about like the big five as it is here, then you never really reach the person you want anyway. So yeah, good for you on the publishing front. As people who are watching this will know, because you'll be seeing it on the Clovis channel, I also run a publishing house. So yeah, snap.
It's a lot of work, so you know what? Yeah. I did do a guest blog on your blog, yes. And I was, you know, really impressed with the work that you do. So
oh, thank you very
really
much.
For you.
Thank you. Yes, that was my first time of meeting your brothers. Yeah, and I still think about them. I'm still waiting for them to appear on a page. So yeah, when it finally is published, you have to let me know so I can get a copy.
Yeah, we're going through beta readers now. Most of them, like I said, I can't do short stories when I'm doing a novel. I can't do the 70,000 words. So it's like 160,000 words. And so let's just put it this way. It's a little tough for some people to, I think they loved, I got a lot of feedback. Were loving it. They were like really into it. And then circumstances happened, and it's like, I really want to get back to your book, but oh crap. I have it with a beta reader who just picked it up a few weeks ago, and she's been making good progress. So that's great.
Yeah, that sounds very promising.
But yeah, it does. And so I will say this, that circumstances with a lot of the people I know this summer have been absolutely horrendous. We've had a lot of just loss, and a lot of things happened this summer that just completely I frankly I'm amazed that we released that book in June, because it's just been crazy. But it's still going ahead, so at least I have that, just take it one day at a time. So I can't say that I think when you look on Facebook and you see a lot of self-publishers, you get kind of intimidated, because they often post very much on how many books they've sold, and you just have to remind yourself you're the first timer.
Yeah.
And you know, you're not going to be moving as fast as them on that scale. So yeah. So it's, as long as you keep reminding yourself that, I think we all suffer from imposter syndrome at some point, and I think mostly at the start, when you don't know if you're doing something right, or if you're second guessing yourself all the time. But I mean, I think it goes back again to the characters. I loved my friends' characters. I love my characters, and I just gotta keep doing that for them. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that if you enjoy reading a book, whether you've written it or, like you're saying, your friend's written it, you can't be the only person out there who enjoys reading it. It's just getting it into the hands of like-minded people.
Yeah, of the right people. That's exactly it. So that's what we'll keep trying to do.
Fantastic. Wow. Well, it sounds like everything is heading in the right direction with the publishing anyway. And like I say, keep me posted on the brothers, because I'm quite excited to share in their debut appearance. So yeah. Well, thank you very much, Tempest. Is there anything
that's so great. They have their first fan. That's great.
That's me. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the readers who are watching this?
get the book. Get the book.
Good advice.
Yeah, good advice. Like get the book. I haven't had I haven't yet seen the other stories, but I am of the historical fiction forum. I am amazed by how much history comes alive when people post and when people are telling about their stories or where they go. And being here in where I live, I don't have the luxury sometimes of being able to just go to a place and see history come alive for me in the place that I want it to. So I'm looking forward to actually reading the other stories too and seeing how they make history come alive. So buy the book. I love my characters. They'll make it worthwhile, but I'm sure everybody else will as well. So
thank you very much. Thank you. I just have one more very quick question, which isn't on the list of questions, I'm afraid. So this is a little sneaky one.
Okay.
A lot of the story, well, not a lot of it, but a decent amount of the story slips into French. Are you a fluent French speaker?
No.
Okay.
No. That was a lot of the inspiration came from my favorite series, the Scarlet Pimpernel. I don't know if people know, they're usually aware of the book and the movie, but the book, have you ever seen the movie with Anthony Andrews?
No.
And Jane Seymour? Ooh, honey, you gotta find that. It is an awesome book, and it's based during the French Revolution. But I watched the movie and I found out that it was based on 2 books, so I got them, and then I realized that there was a series.
Mm-hmm.
Most people only think there's one book. There's a whole 10-book series, and the characters in the movie are portrayed perfectly as they were written in the series. So that makes it 10, just perfect. If you read the books, she kind of the way she writes, because it was English, but somebody would say a curse or something in French, and I thought, okay, well, that's kind of how I want it to come off. I don't want the whole thing to be in French. I don't speak French. So it did a lot. I did not rely on Google Translate.
Oh, well, that's credit to you.
There was a website I found called Reverso. And what it would do is if you put it in, it would actually give you a list of how people say things in French.
Mm-hmm.
And you could usually find a phrase that you could take and you could put in there, and that would be the natural way that they would say it in French. Can I say that it's perfect? No. So if a very French person read this, I apologize in advance. But basically, you're trying. I tried my best to do to try to find the right phrases and match them in. Especially, I think the hardest part was the song, the French song, and I was trying to like, okay, but I found pieces of kind of like bold war cries, and I managed to kind of piece them a little bit together, make sure they fit for the verses.
Well, I'm very impressed. I have to admit, I don't speak a word of French, so French is just beyond me. So I was relying on Google Translate when I was just kind of like, what's this mean? Copy and paste.
Did it come out right? Did it come out okay?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it was exactly right, but it did. It worked with the story, so I'm assuming so. Yeah.
Perfect. All right.
Well, thank
There
you
we
so
go.
much
Okay.
for sharing your answers today, Tempest. I'm sorry for springing that last little question on you at the end there. I'm a bit mean. I tend to do that. So yeah, I should probably have forewarned you about that one. Yeah.
That's okay. That's okay. At least I can explain my process, and that maybe if reader here from Paris reads my book and is like, oh, no wonder. Okay, that's, maybe I can forgive them.
I'm sure it's not the case that would be needed at all.
I hope not, but yeah, just I imagine these things.
Oh gosh, yeah, I know what you mean.
Thank you very much.
I kind of always imagine the worst case scenario with my writing. So yeah, I imagine you felt something similar putting your two brothers out to beta readers, and that moment where you're actually like sending it off onto the first step into the unknown. And
yeah, no, it's extremely nerve-wracking to try and get because you always write yourself, and well, you know what, some writers don't. Some writers can write and not cry and not feel the emotions that they write. For me, I feel every emotion from every character, and I think that when you put your heart into the writing that much, that it's so nerve-wracking letting somebody else read it and therefore judge it. So it's scary, but I'm happy because most of the time right now my brothers are with people I trust.
Yeah.
Who know my crazy sense of humor. And now I tend to think of the worst case scenario. I don't think we'd be writers if we didn't. We need that conflict.
That is true. That's true. Well, good luck with the two brothers and also with the publishing. Very exciting. And thank you again so much for sharing all those answers. It's been lovely hosting you today.
All right. It's been lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me.